Okay, so good afternoon for the third time. Thank you all for the opportunity for me to give this little BBC, this kind of parting words. Before I start with the topic, I would like to introduce myself for those watching online. My name is Em. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I've been living at the Abbey for about 6 months now as a long-term lay guest. And yesterday, late afternoon, I was asked, or maybe voluntold, to give a BBC to highlight some of the things I've experienced at the Abbey over the last 6 months. And I felt a little bit of rebellion bubble up. And so I decided to talk about something a little bit different. So I'd like to share the experience I've had on going from being labeled a transgender guy to being a wannabe Buddhist nun. And this is something that I've maybe talked about with one or two people here, but even then I was certainly trotting around the story rather than going straight into the messy, sticky web of labels, identities, and personas that I handcrafted myself and then got stuck in. And so this story starts when I left my nice suburban high school in the middle of junior year to attend community college. And I found a course called Sex and Gender in Literature, and being both a fan of classic lit and kind of an activist, I said, great, let's enroll. And so I did, and then the first day class comes around, and I'm promptly asked, hi, welcome to class. Nice to meet you. What are your pronouns? Oh, well, excuse me. I had no idea what that question meant. I was utterly dumbfounded. And so this was really the crossing of the threshold into a dark labyrinth containing the monsters of identities, the goblins of labels, and the zombies of personas that lasted for about 18 months. So a few weeks later, I found myself sitting across from a nicely dressed man on a nice couch, and he was asking me, well, how do you define man and how do you define women? What's the difference and how do you feel? So I was sitting at a therapist's office, and he was a specialty in gender nonconforming and transgender people. And I had never thought about these questions before. It didn't really occur to me that there really was a difference. And growing up, I always kind of thought it was an arbitrary terminological division between these two different things. But according to what my therapist was saying in society, there did seem to be permanent fixed genders. But I guess growing up, I knew that I wasn't my body. That was quite clear early on. And growing up, I did feel totally unconnected to my family. And it was like, how did I end up with these people? I think that's a fairly common thing. But I guess to further explain this, I'd like to share a quote from Venerable Tenzin Palmo, which kind of elaborates what I'm saying too, about how just feeling wrong as a girl, so to say. And so she says, I was very confused by being female, she explained. It just didn't feel right. I kept hearing adults say that when you reached adolescence, your body changed. And I would think, oh good, then I can go back to being a boy. And I saw that quote and I'm like, wow, I could have written that too. So that was interesting to see. But I suppose with this and what I was telling my therapist, it led to him diagnosing me with gender dysphoria, which in simple terms means that I was more or less transgender. However, at the same time of this diagnosis, I was planning to go to Nepal to teach English to young Buddhist monks, so I could also be more around the monastic life in Tibetan tradition. So also my therapist said, well, on your 18th birthday, you could start transitioning medically. So I found myself on this cliff of either traveling to Nepal to study more Buddhism or canceling the trip and starting my transition. As most of you know here, I don't like making decisions at all. And so this particular decision was incredibly painful. Everybody was telling me, no, don't go, cancel your trip, be your true authentic self. This is when your life truly starts. And something in me was like, no, they're wrong. And I went anyway, even though everybody was telling me, you're making a terrible choice. And I'm very grateful for that decision, or else I don't think I would have met this tradition as deeply as I have. And so there fortunately I met Lama Yeshe's teachings, Lama Zopa's teaching, and Venerable Children's teachings. And that's pretty much all I studied for the 2 months that I was in Asia. And coming home for 3 months, that's pretty much all I did. And I kind of disregarded this whole notion of my transition, which all my friends and family were like, what is going on? And then they started asking me, like, when are you going back to therapy? What's going on? Like, you're confusing us all. And so I was forced to confront this issue that I had been pushing on the far back burner for 3 months. And so these questions came up with my new very small Dharma knowledge and this other worldview of being transgender. And it was like, if the mind has no characteristics, then what exactly does it mean to be transgender? And Or what does it mean when I say I have the mind of a guy? And then furthermore, if I say I was born with the wrong body, what do they mean when I have the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments that make this precious human life? It doesn't matter the gender. And so all of these questions were just the immense mental suffering that occurred that summer. It was incredible, truly. And then, if I say that I've done everything in cyclic existence so many times, then of course it's weird to me that I don't feel comfortable with my body. I've had so many. Um, that's just a glimpse into this confusion and mental suffering that went on for several weeks. And I was really forced to confront this head on. And so I decided, forget this is way too tough. I went back to my therapist, went back to transitioning, and I had appointments scheduled for last November. And that's also the time when I had asked to come to the Abbey for the winter, because also something in me was like, I've got to be at the Abbey, and there's something to this Dharma thing, and that's kind of what I want to do. So here I am again on this cliff of, do I want to go to the Abbey and study Buddhism or transition? I'm like, it's coming up again. Couldn't escape me. And so I made the right choice of coming back to the Abbey and really focusing on that. So this leads me to my stay at the Abbey, the 6 months, and how to be frank, I really slaughtered those monsters and zombies and goblins that I had aforementioned, that in retrospect were causing me so much suffering. So this winter, especially during the Vajrasattva practice, I analyzed quite deeply what these identities, such as being transgender, meant. And after looking, they prompted me to do a lot of non-virtue, especially like harsh speech to people who called me the wrong pronouns, even though I don't really know what that means still. And just because I was having to fit into this box, and then I was creating boxes for myself, I had to fit into this nice identity, and these are the pronouns, and this is how I should dress, and to meet all of these social characteristics. But in doing that, I was putting other people into boxes too, which was very isolating in retrospect and quite painful. It's like, of course I was feeling lonely because it was just me in this little tiny box. I mean, really, I could have been taken to the post office in it. And, I spent a lot of times thinking on Lamrim while I've been here, especially the 8 sufferings, the 6, and the 3 types of sufferings in the Lamrim Chenmo. And looking at those really strengthened my Dharma and monastic aspirations. But this thing about being transgender also comes in, because it seemed like it's like putting a Band-Aid if your arm falls off. It's like, even if I would have transitioned, like, okay, maybe that would have been happy, but it's not a guarantee of happiness. It comes with a lot of problems. But it doesn't do anything about the fact that I still have to die, I still have illness, I encounter what I don't want, I'm separated from what I do want, and I don't get what I want even though I work hard for it. And at the end of the day, I still have contaminated aggregates. So looking at how those two things played together, and it really just seemed like not a good probability, a solution. And so this whole notion to being transgender went from being a huge, immense amount of suffering in my practice, in my life, to being really a fuel for understanding the defects and suffering of cyclic existence and how unsatisfactory it is. And so ultimately this has led to me wanting to practice as sincerely as I can to benefit all sentient beings. So that's a little glimpse of what I've done this winter at the Abbey. So thank you. Well, I like order. I have a thing for organization and order. And that also comes into how I organize my life and people I interact with. And I want everybody to fit in their nice little box. Don't they dare leave their box that I put them in, even if they don't know that I'm putting them in this box. And that goes for me too. And so I had to fit this box of, I had to dress a certain way, act a certain way, and do all these things to meet all these characteristics of being like a guy, so to say. But then even in the kind of the trans circles, there's like these other categories that you have to fit in to like be in the group, or also on the outside of the group. So then you're not in the trans community and you're not in the regular community. And so that's kind of where I found myself in trying to fit into these boxes, and it's so painful, even though that's what they're telling you to do. And if you're not trans, then you're like gender non-conforming, and there's all these other boxes, and they just get smaller and smaller. And and then it's so painful, that mind of wanting to fit into boxes and really try to, I'm not made of Play-Doh, unfortunately. I can't just make a little box out of myself, and so it's a very painful mind.